Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. Today we're doing the part 2 of the Snow character review, where we're going to go through the class and job analysis, the AI and auto prioritization, the TMR review, and then my general thoughts of the character overall. So jumping into things, looking at his passive abilities, Hero's Fate's definitely the number one ability you're going to want to have on. This both gives him the defense, the HP, and the increased chance of being targeted by 5. Now the rest of these, I like all of them for their own instances. Flurry Enhancement probably the least, if only because the accuracy isn't really needed, but Shadow Runner is super valuable with the extra agility. Warrior Spirit certainly helps him get a little more impact damage in there, and then Shikuchi certainly great for certain maps to help increase his move or jump. All of these help to make a variety of different builds for your Snow, so I like the flexibility options they give him. In terms of my favorite, I probably lean either Shadow Runner or Warrior Spirit, but that's obviously unique to whatever meta or map you're on. Now from a counter ability perspective, really not a big fan of any of these, but when you consider he is an offensive oriented tank, it does make some kind of sense. I would have hoped they put one in here that does some kind of damage mitigation, but overall it's really your choice of either Revenger or Flurry counter. I personally prefer Flurry counter just for the extra increased chance for it to proc. I know Revenger might do a little more damage in certain situations, but overall I like the fact that this is also a double hit, that he might be able to self-chain with himself as well. But either way, I don't think any of these make or break your character builds. Now when we get into the main job, the Indomitable Hero, just looking at the 3 main buffs overall, Triple Guard is that increase of defense and spirit of 20 for 3 turns, while also increasing his debuff resistance against defense breaks by 100%, so cannot be broken. Now this is dispellable, but still a super strong ability. The Reprieve is his courage ability, and Close Call is the other part of his kit that adds to his survivability as his tank, where he gets that 25 strike attack, the 20 AoE resistance both for 3 turns, but then also gets the condition that he will restore half of his health when he falls below 20 HP. This is a major part, along with Reprieve, as to how he can survive long enough to end up winning the fight for you. Now when we look at the offensive abilities, Frost Strike is a decent enough cheap ability here. When we're looking at the range and heights of these, most of these are limited to height 1. Ravage is definitely a great ability from the AoE perspective, while also giving him the extra 40 defense penetration, but Smite 2 is definitely the best ability here, where it's the 100% hit chance, 210% modifier, also dispels buffs and haste for the enemy target. Overall, super impactful for winning your team fights early on and skewing the battle in your favor. Now we look at the Subjob for the Indomitable Hero. I actually like this a lot. Double Strike, maybe less so between the two, a little more limited in range, and the double hit's nice but not game breaking. But Launch is really a game-changing ability with the 30 unit resistance down, which will obviously help teammates, but you've seen how many of his normal attacks are also single target abilities, so this will vastly increase his damage output as well. I do think I tend to prefer Pugilist though as a Subjob, just because I like both Spirit Breaker and Demon Purger for how they increase in strength the more hits you take, so it's perfect for a character like Snow who's going to absorb a lot of hits. Overall though, these are still generally single target abilities. Breathing Technique actually is a really good ability as well. We're going to talk about that in a couple slides here, but overall between these, I think Pugilist probably fits him a little more, in addition to just giving him access to more offensive abilities so he doesn't run out too soon. And finally, the Ninja Subjob does exist. It's really just for the passives and the stats, though. I don't think there's any ability here in the kit that really changes anything from a PvE or a PvP perspective. Now we look at the Limit Break. This is a good enough Limit Break from the perspective that it gives the 67% chance of stun. It's not a significant damage increase, though, for him at the 200% modifier. As we saw, Smite does 210%, and the Pugilist Subjob ones, those could easily get up to 200% and higher as well, the more times it gets hit. So overall, this is really great from the perspective of the status effect, but that's essentially it. It is technically another AoE, but obviously a little more conditional in when it applies. Now for his Mastery ability, they really just give him the extra 5% HP above and beyond what most characters get, and this is where he gets the other 5 hate. So really unique mechanic we're going to talk about at the end here with how he uses his hate as a tank. Now for the AI and auto prioritization, he will always use Reprieve, which is his courage ability, first and foremost when he can. Secondary is the Decider of Fate buff on the Ninja Subjob. Again, not recommended. He needs his other buffs to be used ahead of this. Close Call is the one where he gets that extra health replenished below 20% HP, so this is also a vitally important buff to get off at the start of the fight. Iron Body Stance is technically the next one. Now I don't like this buff on the Pugilist Subjob. To me, it's a worst version of Triple Guard, which is on his main job, that defense and spirit buff increase. He does tend to prioritize the TMR above Triple Guard, and I had to use a Zombie Mask here in the test, and I'll talk about why in just a second, but overall it looks like Triple Guard is the last tier of what he tends to prioritize. And finally, Breathing technique actually does have a time and place for him to self-heal. Now, if there are no enemies in range, the courage is already active, and he's low health, he will use this above close call and some of the other ones. So unless you have Velis, which really this doesn't matter because Velis is going to heal him up to full, this actually is a really nice self-restorative ability considering you can stack healing power up on some of the Truststone passives, and the vision card he's getting for himself will also have the healing power up. So this does have value. Now finally, when we look at the TMR analysis, stat-wise, this is a great TMR. 310 HP, 12 defense, 10 crit evade. It's got 2 uses, so really tuned for the current state of the game in terms of TMR strength, but the ability obviously is skewed more for your ice units, so it's a little more limited in the application of which teams you'd use it in, and it's further limited by the fact that it is not usable unless there is a teammate in range. You cannot use it only on yourself, so do what you will with that information when it comes to AI prioritization and making people move. But I thought that was an interesting mechanic that you must have a teammate in range for the ability to be applicable at all. But either way, accuracy of 30 and ice attack 25 for himself and allies is very strong for ice overall. Really like this TMR for how you could potentially build it out. Now finally, the general thoughts. Really a meaty physical tank with straightforward buffs and an impactful offensive chip damage. If you recall back to his main job here, he's got no teammate buffs anywhere in his kit, so he will always do the same kind of repetition of moving forward, and even the TMR prioritization is a little bit lower, so when you talk about putting a TMR on him that has teammate buffs, he's not always likely to use it, so very straightforward. It could be good or bad, but his biggest survivability tools are non-dispellable, meaning the courage and the HP recovery. It's pretty nice, whereas a lot of other buffs can be dispelled, and he's not one of them. There is a legitimate brawler strategy too with the Pugilist Subjob in terms of absorbing hits, getting healed up, and just doing more damage as the fight goes on. And then the innate / passive 10 hate makes for a really unique hate mechanic here in the game where he can take 5 hits with that. It can't be dispelled like other forms of hate that typically get acquired by a buff on a tank, but it also cannot be replenished. So you really have to make the most of those 5 hits, where after that it really is kind of a chaotic free-for-all. So that's why I think they gave him that impactful offensive output, because you do want to end the fight faster if possible. This is not like your other ice comps that we're used to, where you just expect Velis to heal you up for an eternity and just outlast the enemy. Snow is not the kind of tank that caters to that playstyle. Now, he does also have height and range limiting abilities, but that does allow for reliable buffing, which I like, where he can't get baited too easily. And then there are some versatile passives that allow for a variety of builds, so you can go for the agility, the bulk, the movement. Overall, really great for setting the tank profile that you want, and he is mostly single target ability oriented, so that does have to be taken into account. He does have the AoE on the main job, but it's only 3 casts. It is a little more short range, so the enemy you start to attack, you just need to make sure you finish them off. But that's the Snow Part 2 review in a nutshell. Again, relatively straightforward, does his job well, really valuable addition to the Ice Cast as a completely different kind of tank than Fryevi and Agrius. I'm really happy he's in the game, quite frankly. There are obvious weaknesses which you have to play around, whether that be skewing too much or too little on the magic side of things, whether you need to replenish your hate at some point because the battles are going on for too long, that his movement gets you into trouble because he only moves straight forward the whole time, or maybe certain maps and certain timing of things you'd rather him go toward a teammate. So there are certainly holes in things of his kit that not all tanks have, but overall they've done a really good job designing him, and very excited to see how he influences what we see here in Global. So thanks for watching, everybody, and I will talk to you all soon.